Hello and welcome. I'm Jono Hayes and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. And these are our top stories. Putin, Xi and Kim take centre stage in China as world leaders meet for high-level talks. Meanwhile, Belgium will recognise a Palestinian state at the UN, ramping up global pressure on Israel amid the Gaza crisis. And the Taliban appeal for international aid after a deadly earthquake devastates eastern Afghanistan. Xi Jinping is hosting Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un in Beijing for the first time, bringing the three leaders together for high-level talks at the Shanghai Cooperation Summit. Tomorrow, they will attend a massive military parade in Tiananmen Square, marking the end of World War II. The visit highlights deepening ties between Moscow, Beijing and Pyongyang, while Russia redeploys forces in Ukraine, signalling a possible autumn offensive. Now, for more on this, we're joined from Moscow by Sergei Markov, who is the director of the Institute of Political Studies and also former public spokesman for President Putin. Sergei, thank you for joining us. President Putin has called Xi his dear friend, is what we're hearing. So how much of this is symbolism and how much do you think is actually real strategic alignment that we're seeing?
Well, symbolism, of course, is important for most of the cultures. Both three leaders of China, Russia, and India, they welcome each other's very warm style. But of course, the main is strategic interest. Main threat to all three countries is threat from the Western coalition. Now we can see that Western countries attacked Russia in the tremendous sanction war. Also, United States attacked China in the, in fact, economic war, and now United States start to attack India. So all three countries has to be very close to each other to help each other to protect from the attack from a Western coalition. Same time, it's not only defensive strategy, but also these three big country civilizations responsible for the formation of the new international order. They try to create this new international order, and probably this is one of the strategic goals of the Shanghai Security Organization, so as the BRICS and these three countries, which is the core of both of these organizations. So, formation of the new international order, where there will be no domination of the Western countries. It's the big strategic goal, but also economic interest. The interest to build relations between each other without aggressive negative influence of the Western countries. It's also important.
So do you think what we're seeing here, because Kim Jong-un is there, Putin is there, Xi are all there in Beijing right now, is this potentially, do you think, the start of a new axis in global politics that we're witnessing?
As we could see, no dramatic change happened during these meetings in China. But this such consolidation of those trends which we has allowed before, and its continuation and development of such trends. Also, both countries, China and Russia, want to insist that they pay the biggest tribute to the victory of in the World War II against aggressive countries such as Germany and Europe, united by Germany with Adolf Hitler, and by Japan. So China paid tribute of 35 millions, and Russia paid 27 millions of people for such victory. And by this parade, they want to show that they play the biggest role in the World War II, and they are going to play all together as allies the big role in the formation of the new international order.
And you mentioned there they will all be together and tied, but there is this talk from the SCO of trilateral military exercises between Russia, China and potentially North Korea. How likely do you think that is? But also, what is that going to send as a message to the West?
I think message to the West is very clear. If you will have to recognize a new reality, and this reality means that you are the West, not dictator of the world anymore. Your attempt to have neo-colony regimes, as you made in Ukraine, already will be not accepted for us. And you, the West, we invite you to be a part of the normal cooperation with respect of all national interests and all political systems. So it's a message to the West. But if the West will continue your attempt to make own domination, hegemony over us, you will meet increasing resistance of us, and we're ready to cooperate with such resistance to your attempts. It's a message to the West, but even talking about military cooperation, I don't think that it's a military cooperation too big. It exists. For example, North Korea sent some of their troops to Russia, but it was not so much interest of Russia. It didn't change the situation dramatically. But North Korea army was very interesting to get experience in the ultra new war, which is with domination of drones, which we can see in Russian and Ukrainian territory and Russian territory, because we believe that Donbass is Russian territory partly occupied by Ukraine. And China, it's not only help Russia to develop own economy, but also China getting great experience from Russian army in this new modern war. You know, very good example that in the past, just 2 years ago, drones was on the battlefield something about 1 drone to 10 soldiers. Now, normally, it's 5 drones per 1 soldiers on the battlefield. It's dramatic change, and we can see that drones play more and more roles in this world. And of course, China want to be experiencing this new kind of war.
Sergei, let me just pick up on something you said. Russia, we've heard, are reportedly preparing for this new offensive in Donbass, which, as you said, is part of Russia, or is seen as part of Russia. This chat with China currently, how does it support the war strategy from Russia, from Moscow?
China support not war strategy. Russian militaries and political leaders doing all this strategy themselves. But China understand that this war in Ukraine, not aggression of Russia, it's aggression of Western countries against Russia. And this is a attempt of Western country to recover, to repeat their domination. And if Western country will be successful in aggression against Russia, next main target of Western aggression will be China. So it means that China help Russia to resist the aggression of Western countries, and by doing this, China help itself.
Sergei, there we must leave it. Sergei Markov, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to continue this conversation now. And we'll speak to Derek Grossman, Professor of International Relations at the University of Southern California. Derek, thanks for joining us. You're watching this summit unfold just as we are. Do you see this as China positioning itself as the clear alternative to the US global leadership that we've seen up until now?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I do think it is part and parcel of that approach, but let's also be clear that China has been doing this now for the better part of 2 decades to try to compete against the United States diplomatically, economically, militarily, and I guess more recently, technologically. And so this is, I mean, what we've seen, in the past couple of days with China hosting the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, and then what we're about to see with the World War II Victory Day parade. You have North Korean leader Kim Jong-un there. Of course, Russian President Vladimir Putin is still there, and many other leaders are going to be attending. This is China trying to show the world that it is now not only a great power, but also an ascendant, potentially superpower that could surpass the United States in the global order. And the United States, I must say, is not doing itself any favors. In fact, I'm on the record as saying recently that we are self-destructing under the Trump administration because we are implementing things like reciprocal tariffs across the board. We are no longer the center of globalization and free trade. We also are undermining our own alliances and partnerships. I mean, look at what we've done in the last few months with India. And so that's, where we are. And I think China is benefiting quite significantly from it.
Let me just dig into that for 1 second. Trump has claimed that he's offered to cut the tariffs to nothing for India, but they've yet to respond to this as well. How likely do you think it is that we'll see this big turnaround, an almost 180 from the Trump administration?
Well, I do think that the Trump administration has bitten off more than it can chew with India. First, it started with 25% reciprocal tariffs, and then reportedly, because of the Trump administration's displeasure with India's relationship with India and importing discounted barrels of Russian oil, they slapped another 25% on. So now we're at 50%. But I mean, to your point, could there be a quick turnaround? Could there be a quick deal, right? I think Trump certainly thinks so because he has a very good relationship with Modi, or at least did up until recently. But that remains to be seen. And I think, if you talk to Indian interlocutors, which I do all the time, or, senior Indian government officials, they will tell you that a lot of damage has been done in terms of their trust of the United States. Now that trust is turned into distrust. And that is going to take a long time to repair. I don't think it's like a light switch that could be turned on and off. We're hearing reports that Trump has tried to call Modi on 4 separate occasions, and Modi has declined. And now Trump is not going to attend the Quad Summit to be held in New Delhi later this month, right? So things are really unraveling quickly. That's not to say that India is going to have a better relationship with China than it does with the United States simply because of the last few days. I don't think that's the case either. But I do think that the United States under the Trump administration isn't doing itself any favors in terms of keeping India closer in order to implement its Indo-Pacific strategy of countering China.
Derek, I want to, because Russia, China, North Korea, big players on the stage here at the SCO. What is the wider signal that's here, not just for the US, but also their allies in Europe and in Asia?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the signal is that we don't necessarily need the United States. And in fact, if the United States is not going to have, is not going to have a seat at the table, at the dinner table, that is, then the United States is on the menu. Right. So if the United States is not going to play ball with the rest of the world, then China will have kind of an alternate global order. Right now, also, we need to put this into context. As an analyst, I'm always trying to put stuff into context. Right. The SCO has been ongoing now for decades. Right. And it just so happens, coincidentally, that the SCO was hosted by China this year. Could have been hosted by India or Pakistan or Russia or another member of the SCO this year, but it just so happened that it was China, right? And I think that was very much to China's strategic benefit because the timing is such that the United States continues to self-destruct with these reciprocal tariffs and with trying to withdraw itself from the international system and no longer upholding international law and norms of behavior, that now China can come in and say, well, if the U.S. doesn't want this position of power anymore, right, this not just symbolic position, but also this substantive, influential position, then we are willing and able to take it on. I saw that the Chinese spokesperson just yesterday issued a new graphic on the membership of the SCO. And they are now rightly saying that the SCO is the largest regional organization in the Indo-Pacific. It has surpassed ASEAN, the ASEAN Summit, and the ASEAN Regional Forum and the East Asia Summit, right? So China is at the center of this group, not as a partner or a member state that's sort of secondary to the core, right? But they are now at the core of this regional architecture. And let's not forget, it's not just SCO, right? But it's also the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, that makes up a very large percentage of the global economy based on GDP. China's also at the center of that. So if the US is not going to play by, its own rules, right, and uphold its own rules that were established after the end of World War II, well, new rules will be written that the US will later have to deal with.
Derek Grossman in LA, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, Belgium is set to recognise a Palestinian state at the United Nations later this month, stepping up international pressure on Israel amid the devastation continuing in Gaza. Foreign Minister Maxime Prévost called the move a response to what he described as Israel's violations of international law and the humanitarian tragedy that's unfolding. The decision comes as Israel faces growing isolation over accusations of war crimes, while the Palestinian Authority signals openness to international involvement in Gaza's governance. To discuss this more, we're joined by Dr. Sheni Moore, former Director of Foreign Policy for Israel's National Security Council and also lecturer at the Reichman University, who is joining us from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for having a chat with us. Belgium is now set to recognise a Palestinian state. How significant do you think this is, diplomatically speaking, for Israel?
It's a diplomatic setback for Israel, to be sure. I think that's the entire intention of it. It certainly doesn't conjure up a Palestinian state. There isn't one now, and there won't be as a result of the recognition. Weirdly, the Belgian statement also says that the formalization of the recognition will only happen after the last of the Israeli hostages, which Hamas abducted on October 7th, is returned. So I don't know what kind of timescale that puts on any practical import for it.
Talk to us about other countries. We've got Australia, we've got Britain, Ireland, Canada, France, all making similar moves. Is Israel not beginning to feel somewhat alone on at least a global stage from some people who previously would have been partners?
Well, we have more than 100 countries that have already recognized the Palestinian state since 1988, led by the Soviet Union and its allies. That, too, did not conjure up a Palestinian state. It was a purely declaratory endeavor that didn't change anything. The process of statehood and the process of recognizing statehood has clear precedence in international law. It usually requires four elements: a permanent territory, a permanent population, a government that can govern internally, and one that is able to conduct foreign policy. The putative Palestinian state has none of these things. It exists in two different territories, one of which is governed by an internationally prescribed terrorist organization that has already lost about 75% of the territory it once controlled in a war that it launched almost 2 years ago, and the other by the Palestinian Authority, which directly controls only about 18% of the land and lives in a kind of cautious condominium with the Israelis, who are not going anywhere from the West Bank either.
Look, Belgium is saying the recognition really depends on Hamas and them releasing the hostages, and also Hamas being removed from governance. Is that realistic from where we are currently?
Well, they say that they want Hamas to be removed from governance, but they oppose the only active force that is working to do that. I think essentially, despite the pronouncement, what the Belgians and the French and the British, and arguably many other parties involved in this, I would even speculate perhaps the Israeli government itself, are doing is conceding that the future of Gaza, as they see it after this war, will still involve Hamas.
There's lots of sanctions that are being placed currently on Israel. There's bans on settlement products. There's declaring Israeli ministers persona non grata. We're hearing this from Brussels saying this as well. Many other countries have followed suit. How much pressure is this going to put on Netanyahu's government, if any?
I don't think this will have any effect on his decision-making, and I'm not sure that this will affect the outcome of the war. The war was launched by Hamas, not by Israel, on October 7th, launched with an infamous massacre, and it's Hamas that refuses to end this war. by releasing the hostages and surrendering the October 7th perpetrators and decommissioning itself as an armed militia in Gaza. If you, as an international actor, think that intervening to end the war involves sanctions against the side that was attacked, and that has the capability to continue fighting, I don't think that you understand very much how international diplomacy and war work. It shouldn't surprise us that these measures will not end the war. The way to end the war is to bring about the end of Hamas's military rule in Gaza. If Belgium and some of these other countries were serious about that, they would apply real pressure on two of the countries that they're aligned with who harbor leading Hamas figures, Turkey and Qatar. I know of no such measures that have been taken.
If we are talking about the release of the hostages, if an on-ground offensive actually takes place, we've heard it from the families of the hostages who've said that without a shadow of a doubt, their lives will be sacrificed if an on-ground offensive takes place in Gaza City. Is that a sacrifice that Israel is willing to have in order to eradicate Hamas?
If that's a sacrifice that this government believes it's willing to have, it's not a position that it has shared with the public, nor could it dare to share that position with the public. As far as a great deal of the Israeli public is concerned, this government is responsible for the failures that led to the attack on October 7th, and in particular to these hostages being taken from their homes on a Saturday morning in front of family members that many of them watched get murdered. As far as the public here is concerned, the government lacks the moral authority to sacrifice the hostages for the other goals of the war. If that's the government's genuine position, they certainly have not shared that with the public, nor have they made the case for that.
Let's talk about genocide scholars, because they've said Israel's actions in Gaza meet the UN definition of genocide. What is your response to that? Because it is a very strongly worded statement, but also widely backed accusation.
I think it's an entirely nonsense accusation. The entire field of genocide studies is something that exists for about 20 to 25 years. It's basic ethos, the ontology of this field, if it has one thing, it's minimization and relativization of the Holocaust. That's what the field exists to do. The desire to blame Israel for genocide, the desire to blame Israel, by the way, for the crimes that were committed against the Jewish people in the 1940s has bubbled but barely beneath the surface in this community of scholars and intellectuals and activists for decades. Nothing like this war, nothing in this war resembles what anybody would conventionally think of as a genocide.
Not to interrupt you, Dr. Shenny, but we don't know that because we don't have journalists on the ground, because Israel will not leave Western journalists into Gaza to see what is taking place. Maybe then we can eliminate these accusations of genocide.
There are no journalists in Gaza. I'm constantly being told that every single Hamas militant who's been killed was a journalist. I mean, this is a war that has more phone cameras and ongoing videos of it than any war that I've ever seen. We have relatively good data about the fatalities that are there. They're overwhelmingly male and overwhelmingly of fighting age. What we don't have is anything that looks, by the way, like what October 7th looked like, which is people going into villages and towns and just murdering everyone they see who belongs to a national group.
We have civilian casualties that are taking place.
On the 7th.
Civilian casualties are taking place. You have to keep in mind that we cannot gloss over the civilian casualties.
Nobody should gloss them over at all. Civilian casualties are taking place because the governing authority of Gaza, which is Hamas, has launched a disastrous war and embeds itself entirely in civilian infrastructure, fights from inside hospitals, stores weapons in schools, has opening to its vast network of tunnels from often children's bedrooms and other public buildings. This isn't actually all that different. It's a bit more extreme, but it's not actually all that different from combat that took place against ISIS in Raqqa and Mosul. It's certainly not different from urban warfare that's taken place, sadly, throughout many places in the Middle East in the last couple of decades, without this accusation being thrown around.
Dr. Shani Moore, there we must leave it. Joining us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Now let's take a look at some of the other stories that are making the headlines today. A UN official has said that at least 370 people have been killed in a landslide in Sudan's remote Mara Mountains. The disaster has wiped out much of the village of Tarsin after days of heavy rainfall. Local groups fear the death toll could be closer to 1,000. At least 12 people have been killed and several others have been injured when a bus collided with an oil tanker in northeastern Syria. The official news agency Sana says the crash happened in an area controlled by Kurdish-led forces. Nestlé has fired CEO Laurent Fixet after an internal investigation found that he had broke the company rules over a romantic relationship with an employee. Philippe Navi-Ratelier is a longtime executive and former head of Nespresso and is going to take over Nestlé's shares, dipped more than 2.5% after the company announced the dismissal. The UK is seeing borrowing costs hit a 27-year high. That's piling pressure on the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, ahead of the autumn budget. Higher interest on government bonds and the falling pound as well are raising worries that taxes could go up, with households and banks likely to feel the impact most. The Taliban have appealed for international help after eastern Afghanistan was shaken again by a fresh 5.2 magnitude earthquake, adding to the devastation from the powerful 6.0 magnitude quake over the weekend that killed at least 1,400 people. The new tremor struck near the epicenter of Sunday's quake, hitting remote mountainous provinces which are close to the Pakistan border. It also further complicated the rescue efforts in a region that's already struggling with landslides and heavy rainfall. The global aid agencies have said that they've slashed their aid to the region since 2021, and the country faces an uphill battle in responding to yet another natural disaster. For more on this story, we're joined by Ambassador Nasir Andisha, who's the permanent representative of Afghanistan to the United Nations in Geneva. Ambassador, thank you for joining us. First of all, give us the latest of what you know and paint the picture of the scale of the destruction and loss of life as well, following not just the initial quake, but also the subsequent 5.2 quake from today.
Well, thank you very much. We are closely in touch with the UN offices here, particularly OCHA, which is monitoring the situation and have established a base in the Jalalabad airport, and the sort of to do the rescue operations and to coordinate humanitarian activities. I think the picture is now access has been established in most of the remote areas, as you also mentioned. This is one of the mountainous areas in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan in generally is a mountainous country. But this particular corner of eastern Afghanistan bordering with Pakistan, Kunar, and Nangarhar, Nuristan, Laghman provinces, the villages are very scattered and remote in the mountains. And the situation was further exacerbated, the problem by a flood which was there a few days back, and also the access to these roads, which are mostly untarmac roads, ordinary roads, had difficulty of reaching, and Taliban has very few, if any, helicopters which could reach there. But now contact has been established, access has been established. Initially, some medical aids has reached the places. I think the injured have been now transferred to Jalalabad Hospital, which is, far away, with roads. It will take hours and hours, probably, more than 6-7 hours for people to reach. But I think that's the situation right now. And what is needed right now mostly is medical assistance, but also rescue teams, which is not in the capacity of the Taliban. There is no professional rescue officials or, corps, neither within the Taliban ranks, and the Ministry of State for Emergency and Afghanistan Red Cross and society, or, the capacity is very low. So far, there have been lots of pledges of assistance, but we all know that, access to that area and technical difficulties will prevent it from being swift and effective enough.
Let's talk about those difficulties for just 1 second, Ambassador. Obviously, relations have been strained since 2021. Do you think the world is willing to step up and help now that the Taliban have asked for this international assistance?
I think there have been rhetoric. Of course, there have been lots of words of solidarity from leaders, from the region, but also internationally, as far away as Canada. Canadians Prime Minister has also, had a statement about it. I think that words of solidarity, translating it into action, I think it will be very late, too little, too late for people who have been affected in those areas. And as the reports are coming that access to those health facilities, which was there during the Republic, because in each districts, in each provinces, there have been health facilities which was assisted by the international organizations and international aid agencies. Those were all already, since 4 years, there have been drastic cuts and some of them had to stop their activities. I think that itself has an impact. On the other hand, I think except the UN assistance, which OCHA told us that there have been $5 million worth of assistance from the emergency fund of United Nations, which I think that will be effective because UN has capacity and offices around Afghanistan and in Afghanistan. But the rest of these pledges, I think, will hit technical assistance, even including how to get those assistance to Afghanistan. The financial system is under, lots of strains and limitations. I think all of those will make these pledges to be only words rather than action.
We've seen a massive drop in aid to Afghanistan in recent years as well. Have the Taliban at any point rejected the aid from the West? Because now evidently that is hurting the rescue effort. Has that been the case, or has there just been a real dip?
I think, the kind of conditions that Taliban impose on those aid, which makes it almost impossible for those even agencies which had a long established relationship with Afghanistan. The agencies like the Swedish Committee for Afghanistan or Norwegian Committee and for Refugees and things, ICRC, for example, Médecins Sans Frontières, which established themselves even during the jihad, 40 years back in Pakistan. Taliban made it so difficult for them who worked with the Mujahideen in the past that they have to close their offices and leave Afghanistan. I think those conditions, for example, women access. Right now, most of the injuries, most of the fatalities are women, girls, and children. And remember that, in Jalalabad hospital, probably we have 4 or 5 medical doctors because there is no more universities or education system which could produce women doctors, so let alone women being in those 4 remote provinces. I think the situation that the Taliban themselves has created somehow inhibits, somehow made it very difficult for the aid agencies to help. And that's also plus or in addition to, of course, the reluctance, in addition to the difficulties, in addition to the sort of aid fatigue, but also in addition to the aid and the foreign assistance being diverted now into security, into something else in Europe or elsewhere. I think there is, in one hand, there is less attention and appetite in the aid in the donor organization, donor countries, but on the other hand, Taliban are also giving a very good excuse for the aid not to come to Afghanistan, and that is lack of access and lack of opportunities for women to work as part of the aid agencies.
Ambassador, let's talk about, because aside from the earthquake, take that out of the equation, there's also drought, there's food shortages, there's refugees returning back to Afghanistan as well. How can the United Nations and also the wider world who are watching saying we would like to help, how can they help in something that effectively is overlapping crises taking place?
I think that's the most difficult question right now, and the only major organization on the ground right now is the United Nations. And we all know that, the limitation of United Nations. We know that United Nations itself is going through such a difficult, time that they are slashing different offices, and there is, whole austerity measures are going on. So I think, without a sort of, change in the Taliban's attitude toward their foreign relations, towards sort of, UN and the international organizations and states' obligation toward its, international treaties, I think the Afghan people, our people who are coming from Pakistan and Iran or who have lost their jobs, they are now, between what we say, the devil and the deep blue sea. In one hand, there is a lack of funding, lack of international attention. On the other hand, there is lots of edicts and Taliban's rules, which makes it so very difficult to put Afghanistan on the priority of international aid system. So why not aid could go somewhere where the state is more receptive and more supportive, and they're welcoming. So I think that's a very tough situation, and I don't know whether the regional countries will step in. We understand that there was a huge Shanghai cooperation meeting going on in our neighborhood, and most of the leaders of the region were there during this meeting. But even what those leaders, including Russia, which is now recognized Taliban officially, put forward in the statement was not a support to the Taliban, but as a request for them to have an inclusive state where the rights of all communities and ethnicities and women are respected. I think it's a situation where the people of Afghanistan are caught, and unfortunately it's very bleak. And besides this man-made issue that we have in Afghanistan, now we have a series of natural disasters.
Ambassador Nasser Andisha, thank you so much for joining us. Vietnam has celebrated 80 years of independence with its largest military parade in decades. In a speech to mark the occasion, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, Tu Lam, paid tribute to those who died fighting for independence. He also called for the protection of Vietnam's sovereignty. Patrick Falk has this report.
Marking 80 years since its declaration of independence from colonial rule was a spectacular display of Vietnam's military might and national pride. Tens of thousands of people crowded the streets of the capital, Hanoi, many of them dressed in red and waving Vietnamese flags.
I feel honored and happy to be here. I love peace, I love my country, and I truly understand that having freedom and independence is a wonderful thing.
Nearly 16,000 soldiers joined the military parade, which also included honor guards from Russia, China, Laos and Cambodia. The main celebrations were held in Ba Dinh Square. It's where revolutionary leader Ho Chi Minh made a speech marking the foundation of an independent Vietnam. Colonial rulers France did not recognize the new country then and fought a war that lasted nearly a decade before their defeat. On display, the country's most advanced military equipment, including Russian-made helicopters and fighter jets.
Peace is very beautiful. If there's no peace, we cannot achieve anything. Peace did not come to us out of nowhere. We had to pay for it with our blood, flesh, skills, and the sweat of many generations of our people.
As part of the celebrations, Vietnam gave cash handouts to each of its more than 100 million citizens. It also released nearly 14,000 prisoners as part of an amnesty. Patrick Falk, Al Arabiya English.
Now let's take a quick look at the top business news for today. Jobs at the Swiss-based Starbucks supplier are at risk after US President Donald Trump imposed 39% tariffs on Switzerland. Coffee machine maker Thermoplan, which employs more than 500 people, says the tariffs on industrial metals are costing the company around $250,000 a week. Tesla has just received over 600 orders for its Model Y in India since launching sales in mid-July. Deliveries are set to roll out soon, but the company is entering a market where EVs are still just a tiny slice, about 4% of sales. And with slowing demand worldwide, Tesla is betting on India, even if it means paying some steep import duties. And a final reminder of our top stories. Putin, Xi and Kim take center stage in China as world leaders meet for high-level talks. Meanwhile, Belgium will recognise a Palestinian state at the United Nations, ramping up global pressure on Israel amid the Gaza crisis. And the Taliban appeal for international aid after a deadly earthquake devastates eastern Afghanistan. And that's all from us on W News for now. Don't forget, as always, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on X. The Real Deal with Tom Burgess-Watson is on the way next, and we'll be back in just a couple of hours with W News Extra. But for now, goodbye.